So even sex for fun between husbands and wives, he's in this definition, he said, well, no, that's sexual misconduct. But this can't be traced any further back than Atisha. The Buddha apparently wasn't quite that specific about this. So I would fall back on the general definition of no causing harm through sex. And then there's no lying. So specifically, particularly for monks and nuns, but for anyone I would say, this is about no lying about spiritual attainment. I think maybe I said this a while ago. Sometimes my Dharma talks, they overlap, and I forget to whom I told them and to whom I said this and where. But you know, if I sat here and said, well, you know, I'm really actually completely enlightened. I'm a perfect Buddha, so you should all bow to me and call me Buddha from now on. Well, I will have completely destroyed my monastic vow against lying. But even for lay people, we have this precept against lying. And the reason for this is obvious. If we lie, well, we have to make sure we're consistent when we lie, because if we get caught, then people are upset with us and our reputation is damaged. And then when we do tell the truth later about something important, maybe they won't believe us. It just causes all kinds of problems. And think about it, when you're a little kid and you've told a lie, just remember the stress, wondering whether or not you're going to get caught. One of my mother's favorite stories of me, this isn't really maybe a good example of what I'm talking about, but one of my mother's favorite stories of me is when I was maybe 3 or 4 years old. She came down into the kitchen in the morning and there were little tiny chocolate handprints on the cabinets and all over the refrigerator. And then she opened the refrigerator and there was a chocolate cake on a low shelf in the refrigerator with little handfuls grabbed out of it. And then she saw me and I've got chocolate cake all around my mouth and all over my hands and all over my t-shirt. And she said, now, did you eat the cake? And I looked at her and I said, mommy. That's how she describes the story. Well, that wasn't a very good lie, now was it? I got caught right away. I think she said that she was so tickled with what I had done that I didn't really get in trouble. But just imagine back when you're a kid or at any time when you've told a lie and then there's all this stress, right? In terms of meditation, if we're not following these precepts, we're carrying this stress around in our minds of having known that we've done something wrong, of maybe getting caught for having done something wrong. You can't practice the Dharma. This is one of the reasons why these precepts are so important. Not to mention the fact that we need to avoid creating negative karma, because if we create negative karma, it just comes back to us. And then we have all kinds of obstacles, not only in terms of the Dharma, but just in terms of accomplishing the regular things in the world that we want to accomplish. If we've got lifetimes of stealing from people, and eventually people are going to start stealing from us, or we're going to try to make a living and we won't be able to. Maybe that's a cause. Or maybe that's a result, rather, of not being able to successfully make a living or something. So basically, we want to cause no harm through lying. But then there's this objection that comes up about absolutely no lying. What if telling a lie would save someone from harm? There's this story that comes up. Well, if someone comes to your door and they've got an axe in their hand or a shotgun and they say, I'm here to kill your husband or your wife or your mom or your dad, are they home? And you know that they're upstairs taking a nap, but you say no, technically you've lied. But then if you say yes, well then you've participated in someone getting murdered. Obviously, you tell the lie, right? So there are times when telling a lie is in fact the most compassionate thing to do. Compassion is what needs to motivate our behavior. So sometimes telling a lie is the most compassionate thing to do, but we have to be very careful. If we think we have this motivation to tell a lie or to do something that would normally be wrong in order to benefit someone else out of compassion, we have to ask ourselves, am I really doing this out of compassion for others? Or am I just telling myself that because I want to do something wrong? We have to be very careful of our motivation. This brings us to the last one, no intoxication. So I may have told this story before about the monk who was on the road, and the woman was blocking the road, and she's holding a jug of alcohol, and she has a dog next to her, and she says, "I'm not going to let you pass unless you drink this jug of alcohol, or you kill the dog, or you have sex with me." Now, logically, the monk could just turn around and go back or walk around her or something, but the story isn't about logic, right? It's a parable. So the monk thinks, he says, well, okay, I can't have sex with her, and killing the dog would be terribly wrong, but, you know, drinking the alcohol won't be so bad. So he drinks the alcohol, and he gets so drunk that he kills the dog and has sex with the woman anyway. So the point of the story is that alcohol, well, we know alcohol lowers our inhibitions, right? We all hear stories about somebody getting drunk at a party, and then they have a lampshade on their head, and they're dancing on top of a table or something, and somebody gets pictures of it. So alcohol lowers our inhibitions, and then it leads us to engage in other wrong behavior. That's the problem. But then I would also say the word Buddha means one who is awake. It's someone who has woken up from ignorance and who sees clearly. Right? So if we are getting drunk or getting high, if we're imprinting the tendency on our minds to pursue happiness in getting drunk or getting high, then how can we wake up and see clearly? We're heading in the opposite direction. That's a real problem. And people might think, well, you know, just a glass of wine occasionally, well, that's okay. Maybe. From my perspective, though, just like if we're, you know, I said with the vow against stealing, the precept against stealing, if you're, you know, have this habit of always stealing somebody's bubble gum or something simple and small, you're building that tendency to steal. It's the same thing with alcohol. If you drink a little bit of alcohol, you're still slowly creating that tendency to search after happiness, some kind of happiness, through clouding the mind. And so it's not such a good idea. So obviously, you know, murdering someone is terrible, right? But if you take a person and you just keep poking them with a needle, again and again and again and again, eventually they're still going to bleed to death, right? It's the same thing. You drink a little alcohol, a little alcohol, a little alcohol. You're imprinting upon the mind the tendency to cloud the mind. So that's heading in the opposite direction of the Dharma. Now, of course, at the same time, there are no Dharma police. There's nobody looking over our shoulders saying, oh, you just had a sip of champagne at a wedding, you're going to go to hell. Nobody does that. Nobody does that. The choice, we have to make the choice for ourselves. So do with these precepts what you will. But the reason why the Buddha taught this is because he said, again, it isn't the Buddha sitting up on high saying, don't do this, do that, because I said so. And if you don't, I'm going to judge you. The Buddha doesn't judge. There's no judgment. The Buddha simply said, well, if you follow these precepts, you're going to avoid a whole lot of suffering for yourselves and for others. And if you don't follow these precepts, you will find on your own naturally that, you know, not following these precepts will lead you to suffering. So learning and following these precepts is in our own best interests, as well as the best interests of the people around us whom we affect through our behavior. So those are my thoughts on the 5 precepts. Nope. And we have a bit of time for question and answer. Let me pass the microphone out. Does someone have a question? You do? Do you mind?
Can I just ask about the microphone?
Huh?
Okay, if I speak on the microphone.
Well, we had some people who want to be able to hear the questions. Thank you.
Okay, I have a question about the Pure Land.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same place where people who are the stream enters end up, and if not, what is it? And then I also read something about Amitabha Buddha cult. Is that what we're talking about, Pure Land?
Okay, so then the question is, the Pure Land, is that where stream enterers end up? Honestly, I'm not sure. I'm not really well versed in the details of the Pure Land tradition, but it would seem to me that we go to the Pure Land, thank you, we go to the Pure Land if we create the causes to go to the Pure Land. So people who are chanting Namo Amitabha Buddha, Namo Amitabha Buddha, and saying prayers to be reborn in the Pure Land, you're creating the causes to be reborn in the Pure Land. But then there are Buddhists who don't practice Pure Land Buddhism. They're not creating the causes to be reborn in Amitabha Buddha's Pure Land. And so it seems to me logically that there are some stream enterers, perhaps, who would go to the Pure Land and some who would not.
So the Pure Land is not permanent though, right? One could go further away from enlightenment once you get to Pure Land if you don't follow the right path.
Well, I think the idea is once you're in the Pure Land, you are in the presence of Amitabha Buddha. You're born in a lotus, and basically all you do is practice the Dharma. So my understanding is that once you reach the Pure Land, there's no falling back.
So you're safe.
You're safe. But you're right, though, that the Pure Land is not permanent. So what happens is one of two things. Either you, in the Pure Land, you become enlightened, you become a Buddha, or another version of the Pure Land tradition is that when Maitreya Bodhisattva, who is currently practicing in what's called the Tsushita heaven, when he becomes the next great Buddha, so after the current age of the Dharma ends, the Dharma disappears from the world, Maitreya Bodhisattva will be the next great Buddha. He'll be born in the world. And at that point, some people in the Pure Land, those who haven't gone on to enlightenment directly from the Pure Land, will be reborn as human beings and become Maitreya Buddha's disciples. And in that lifetime, they will then achieve enlightenment. So there's one of those two options. So the Pure Land is not a permanent heaven. You're right about that.
But it still starts safe, right?
I would say from my understanding of the Pure Land tradition, it's a safe zone. That's how I understand it.
That's all.
I'm sorry?
Sounds a little too easy.
I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe being reborn in the Pure Land is a wonderful thing, but it's all, I mean, if you're practicing Dharma all the time, maybe that's difficult. Probably easier to do it in the Pure Land than in the regular world of humans. But yeah, I don't know. I have no memory of ever having been born in the Pure Land, so I can't tell you for sure. Sure, but that's a good question. And then, yeah, when people talk about the cult of Amitabha, there's this term cult that's like a bad term. We talk about negative cults. But then religious scholars will talk about like the cult of Kwante Ambotat, and it just means faith and practice revolving around Kwante Ambotat. So it's not a negative term. So if you hear somebody talk about the cult of Amitabha, they're probably using it in that sense, not a negative sense. But yes, so Amitabha Buddha is Amitabha Buddha's Pure Land that people are trying to be reborn in if they are practicing what we call Pure Land Buddhism. It revolves around Amitabha Buddha.
You mentioned this temple is Pure Land.
This is the thrust of this temple is Pure Land. My understanding of Vietnamese Buddhism, though, is that it's kind of a mixture of Pure Land and Zen. More specifically, well, even in other countries, even in other Zen orders, like in South Korea, the monks tend to practice Zen more, but then the rituals done for the laity tend to revolve more around Pure Land practice. And that's my understanding of what it's like in Vietnam, or at least traditionally. The monks in the monasteries, the monks and nuns were doing more meditation, and then the Pure Land activity was more geared towards the lay people. Yes. Good questions, thank you. There are other questions?